I had just propped myself up with a pillow, my ribs still sore from the accident, when my phone buzzed. I thought it was probably another reminder for the quarterly meeting, or maybe some corporate update from Travis Walters, the CEO of Bright Tech. My thumb hovered over the screen as I glanced at the name. Travis Walters. Whatever it was, I could handle it. I opened the text. The first few words didn't register. I read it again. Your position is no longer needed. We've cleared out your office. Please don't come back. Regards, Travis Walters. I stared at it. My mind tried to process it, like I was reading someone else's message. My thumb scrolled back to the top, hoping I missed something. Maybe a mistake, some sort of typo. But no, that was it. That was all. I felt my stomach churn, something tight and cold pulling at the edges of my chest. I had just finished a major project for Bright Tech before the car accident, putting in weeks of sleepless nights, and this was how it ended? A text, no warning, nothing. I'd worked for them for over a decade. Loyalty, dedication, all that crap. And now? Now I was discarded like an old piece of equipment. I leaned back, trying to breathe through the shock. The morphine in my system made everything feel blurry, but even the haze couldn't dull the sting of humiliation. It hit harder than my busted ribs. The betrayal hit harder than the wreck that put me in this hospital bed. I turned to the side to grab the remote, trying to distract myself with the TV, but a voice from the bed next to mine cut through the noise. Rough news, man? I glanced at the guy in the bed beside me. Tony, he'd been here since I got admitted, but I hadn't paid him much mind before. He looked like he knew something. Maybe he'd heard the frustration in my voice when I cursed under my breath. I forced a smile, shrugging. Yeah, just some bad news. Tony gave me a quick, understanding nod. It was a simple gesture, but something about it stuck with me, like he could see through the mess in my head. I wanted to say more, to explain, but I couldn't. I just sat there, the weight of my whole career unraveling, trying to figure out how the hell I'd gotten here. Tony leaned back against his bed, eyes still on me, waiting for something. I wasn't sure what, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he saw something in me, something that made him think I'd be worth the time. I wasn't ready for whatever he was about to drop on me, but he didn't seem to care. Look, man, he said, his voice casual, like he wasn't talking to someone who just got fired through a text. I get it, this sucks, but I'm not here to offer you pity or bullshit. I'm here because I need someone who knows Bright Tech inside and out. I raised an eyebrow, the skepticism coming back in full force. What are you talking about? Tony shifted in his bed, making himself more comfortable like we were having a normal conversation, not one where he was about to drop a bombshell on me. I'm the CEO of SyncLogic Technologies, he said, with an almost bored shrug. I don't know if you've heard of us, but we've been trying to poach Bright Tech's clients for years. We've had the tech, we've had the drive, but we needed someone who understands how Bright Tech operates, the relationships, the internal systems, the way things work behind the scenes. I stared at him, still trying to figure out if he was full of shit. So what? You want me to help you steal clients? Tony didn't flinch. He just met my eyes, steady. I'm not asking you to steal anything. I'm asking you to come work with me. SyncLogic doesn't play the same games Bright Tech does. We value people. I can see what you've built with your clients, Jake. They trust you. Hell, I've heard the stories. I know the work you've put in. And I know it's not going to be appreciated at Bright Tech anymore, especially not after the way they dumped you. I wasn't sure how to process that. The idea of jumping ship to a competitor so soon after getting kicked to the curb made my head spin. Was I really ready to start over? Or was I just desperate, clinging to whatever lifeline floated by? You think I'd just hop over to SyncLogic because you say so? He smiled, almost like he knew exactly what I was thinking. No, I think you'd hop over because you deserve to be somewhere that actually appreciates what you bring to the table. You're not a cog in a machine, Jake. You're a good operator, and you've got the kind of connections that could put SyncLogic on the map in a way Bright Tech never will. I hated how much that hit me, how much of it felt true, but I wasn't ready to bite, not yet. I just nodded, my mind racing. I don't know, man. I'm still processing this shit. Tony didn't seem to mind the hesitation. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, scrolling through it for a second before handing it to me. Take a look. You tell me if it sounds like an opportunity or just a desperate move. The screen was filled with messages, clients, former clients. All of them were asking me if I was okay, how my recovery was going, and, most shockingly, if I'd be back to work soon. Some of them were asking if they could still work with me directly now that I wasn't with Bright Tech. My chest tightened, my throat went dry. I hadn't expected this. These were the clients I'd built relationships with over the years, the ones I knew by name, the ones who trusted me because I understood their business. I thought they'd just fall in line with the new manager, whoever they were. But here they were, reaching out to me. I handed the phone back to Tony, feeling a little lost. "This doesn't make sense." He shrugged again. "It makes perfect sense, Jake. You've earned that trust. They're not going to suddenly forget about you because Bright Tech kicked you to the curb. The only question now is whether you're going to let them move on or if you're going to step up and take control of this thing." I swallowed hard. The idea was tempting. Hell, it was a lot more tempting than I wanted to admit. But I didn't know if I could trust it or him. And why should I trust you? Tony looked me dead in the eye, not blinking. "Because I've been where you are. I've seen companies throw good people away. It's bullshit. You deserve better. And I think you'll find Sync Logic isn't about tossing people aside when they stop being useful." I sat there in silence, staring at the phone again, at the messages flooding in. It was a lifeline, but I wasn't sure if I could grab it. Still, I couldn't ignore the pull. What if this was the start of something better? Or was it just another guy trying to take advantage of me when I was down? I didn't know yet, but I was starting to think maybe it was worth finding out. The drive home from the hospital felt like a blur. My ribs throbbed with every bump in the road. But that pain wasn't even on my radar. It was the stuff swirling around in my head that had my attention, trying to make sense of that text from Travis and everything that came after it. I barely made it through the door before I grabbed my laptop, hoping some work would help me focus. But the truth was, I wasn't sure I was ready to face anything at all. I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of everything. The physical pain in my ribs was nothing compared to the gut punch of betrayal. I had spent years at Bright Tech, grinding through the bullshit, the late nights, the board meetings, all for what? To be discarded the second I wasn't of use? The worst part was that I knew my clients. Hell, they respected me. They trusted me. Now they were stuck dealing with some clueless new manager who didn't understand them the way I did. Some guy who probably didn't even know their names. I tried to shove all of it to the back of my mind and opened the email from Tony. He was offering more than just a shoulder to lean on. He reminded me to take my time recovering, but also, he made sure I knew that the offer was still on the table. "When you're ready," it said, "we can talk." His words hung in the air like a lifeline. As much as I hated to admit it, the more I thought about it, the more it felt like the only way out of this mess. But could I really just walk away from Bright Tech? Was I ready to jump into a new company, especially one that was directly competing with my old one? The uncertainty gnawed at me, but at least it wasn't the kind of blind rage I'd felt just a few hours earlier. It was the kind of decision that could change everything. I leaned back, rubbing my face, when I heard the sound of paper sliding under the door. I walked over and opened the door. There, on the floor, was an envelope. I tore it open, almost expecting another advertisement or some kind of junk mail. But inside was a business card, Sync Logic Technologies, the same company Tony ran. I turned it over, and there was a short note, handwritten in bold, neat letters. "You've got something they can't replace. Think about it." I stood there for a long minute, staring at the card in my hand. It wasn't just a card. It was an invitation, an opportunity to leave everything behind and start fresh. Maybe it was desperation talking. Maybe it was just the frustration of being dumped by a company I'd given everything to. But something about it felt right. As much as I hated to admit it, the more I looked at that card, the more I realized there was a life for me outside of Bright Tech. And for the first time in a long time, I actually felt like I might have a chance at something better. The night stretched on like a bad dream, my mind spinning with all the possibilities. I tossed and turned, replaying the last few days. Hell, the last few years, trying to figure out if this was the right move. The card from Sync Logic sat on my nightstand, taunting me in the dim light. I could still feel the weight of it in my hand, the possibility of something different hanging in the air. By the time morning came, I had made up my mind. I didn't want to feel like this anymore, stuck in the past, haunted by what could have been at Bright Tech. I had to at least look into sync logic. If nothing else, I owed it to myself to know more. So I pulled up my laptop, nursing a cup of coffee that was more bitter than comforting, and started digging. What I found didn't surprise me. Sync Logic was growing fast. Their growth numbers were impressive, especially for a smaller company trying to go toe-to-toe with Bright Tech. They were younger, more agile, and more willing to take risks than the corporate behemoth I'd spent years working for. They had a fresh approach, one that didn't seem weighed down by bureaucracy and old-school thinking. But what caught my attention most was how they treated their people. They didn't just talk about their employees like they were assets. They acted like they valued them. Everything from their internal culture to how they communicated with clients was about collaboration, not control. The stark difference from Bright Tech hit me like a punch in the gut. At Bright Tech, it had always been about the bottom line, about pushing people until they burned out and tossed them aside when they weren't useful anymore. Sync Logic, on the other hand, seemed like a place where you could actually build something, where people mattered. I closed my laptop and sat back, feeling a strange sense of clarity that I hadn't felt in days. I wasn't just running away from Bright Tech. I was running towards something better, something I could actually believe in. I picked up my phone, sent Tony a quick message, and told him I was ready to meet. But as I prepared for the meeting, a thought gnawed at me. This wasn't going to be easy. Leaving Bright Tech meant burning bridges, possibly sacrificing my reputation in an industry where everyone knew everyone else. The truth was, I didn't know how my clients would react if they found out I'd jumped ship to a competitor. I was already hearing from them, but would they still trust me? Would they think I was desperate? I met Tony at a coffee shop just a few blocks from Sync Logic's headquarters. It was a cozy spot, small, quiet, the kind of place where people could have a conversation without the noise of the world intruding. Tony was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, looking like he was waiting for something important. He waved me over with a warm smile, and I couldn't help but feel a little more at ease. Maybe it was the calmness in his eyes, the way he didn't seem rushed, even though everything about this situation felt like it was moving at a breakneck pace. "Jake," he said, standing as I approached. "Glad you made it." We shook hands, and I could tell he wasn't just offering a formality. He was genuinely interested. There was no pretense with him, and that made me feel like I could trust him, or at least trust that he wasn't playing some game. He motioned for me to sit down, sliding a folder across the table as soon as I did. "Take a look at this," he said, as if he already knew what was coming. I opened the folder, scanning through the documents. There were plans for expansion, client acquisition strategies, internal reports, everything laid out in black and white. The more I read, the more I realized how much thought had been put into this company. This wasn't some fly-by-night operation trying to cut corners. These people were serious, and, more importantly, they were trying to build something that wasn't about just getting by, but about actually growing. I was starting to see it, the value in the offer Tony had extended to me. This wasn't just a job. It was a chance to build something real again, to have an impact, not just for myself, but for a company that actually seemed to care about its people. But just as I was about to ask Tony a question about one of the strategies, he paused. He didn't look at me, but his hand moved to his phone, and he checked something quickly before tapping a few times. He slid the phone toward me across the table without saying a word. The email on the screen made my stomach tighten. It was from someone inside Bright Tech. The subject line was simple: internal memo, immediate attention required. I clicked on it, the weight of what I was seeing sinking in immediately. The memo was filled with red flags, talk of financial instability, client churn, and executive decisions that bordered on reckless. The kind of decisions that were going to burn the company down from the inside out. I felt the blood drain from my face as I scrolled through it. This wasn't a bad quarter. This was systemic, and they were too blind to stop it. "Shit," I muttered, my mind racing. This is huge." Tony was watching me closely, like he knew exactly what I was thinking. "Yeah," he said, his tone still calm. "It's not good, and it's why I'm glad you're here. Bright Tech is in chaos. That's not speculation, Jake. That's reality." I leaned back in my chair, the weight of it all hitting me. I wasn't just leaving a company, I was walking away from a sinking ship, and this was the proof. The documents in my hands, the emails from clients reaching out to me, everything was falling into place. I had to get out. But there was something more to it. I wasn't just going to let Bright Tech get away with what they'd done. Not after everything. I needed to make sure the truth got out. Make sure people understood how badly they'd mishandled things. I looked up at Tony, my mind set. "I'm in," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'll join SyncLogic, but I'm not just here to help build something better. I'm going to make sure people know what's really going on at Bright Tech. They need to see the truth for what it is." Tony didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled a little, like he'd been waiting for me to say that. "I figured you'd say that," he replied, his eyes gleaming with something I couldn't quite place. "It's all part of the plan, Jake. You've got a front row seat to watch Bright Tech implode, but you're also in a position to make it happen." I froze for a second. Was he suggesting what I thought he was suggesting? He didn't elaborate, just took a sip of his coffee, the look in his eyes telling me everything I needed to know. He knew exactly what was coming. The first few days at SyncLogic felt like I'd been shot out of a cannon. I dove straight into client relations, calling on the contacts I'd made over the years, the ones who had always trusted me and had been the backbone of my success at Bright Tech. It felt good. Damn good. Like I was finally doing something that mattered again. At Bright Tech, I'd spent years climbing a corporate ladder that was leaning against the wrong wall. Here at SyncLogic, it wasn't about titles or ticking boxes. It was about making real connections, building something, getting shit done. I could breathe again. But while I was moving forward, Bright Tech was in free fall. I started getting texts from Matt, a guy I'd worked with for years. We'd been through the grind together. He wasn't one to sugarcoat things. "You need to hear this, Jake," his message said. "Travis is losing it. He's trying to patch up the leaks, but the whole ship's sinking." Matt filled me in on the chaos. Apparently, Travis Walters, Bright Tech's CEO, was scrambling, trying to hold on to whatever he could. Clients were pulling back, and leadership was in panic mode, trying to plug holes with no real answers. Word was getting out about the company's internal dysfunction, and it wasn't pretty. No matter how much Travis tried to cover it up, the cracks were showing. I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. This was what I'd seen coming, even when I was still there. Bright Tech had always been more focused on appearances than on doing the right thing. Now it was crashing and burning, and I wasn't part of the mess anymore. Then came the calls from my old clients. They were jumping ship, one by one. A couple of them asked if I could consult for them directly. I agreed, of course, but I kept it low-key. I didn't need to make a scene, not yet anyway. I wasn't trying to rub it in anyone's face, but part of me couldn't help but feel a little satisfaction. This was the result of Bright Tech's arrogance. They'd push me out, thinking they could replace me with anyone, and now their clients were walking out the door. Then, the worst part came. A couple of days after my consulting calls, a series of internal memos from Bright Tech started to leak. The company was trying to save face, but instead, they were slandering my name. The memos accused me of abandoning my responsibilities, even suggesting that I'd been the one to sabotage some of the deals we had going. The rage hit me like a freight train. How dare they? After everything I'd done for that company, this was the thanks I got. But it wasn't a surprise. I'd seen how the corporate machine operated. When things went south, they found someone to blame. And this time, that someone was me. I wasn't going to take it lying down. I didn't need to. With everything I was doing at SyncLogic, I was finally in control of my own future. And as I watched Bright Tech flail and try to pin the blame on me, I realized just how much I'd been suffocating under their thumb. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was personal. And I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I didn't expect it. But the invite to speak at the tech conference came through. It was a big deal, one of those events where industry leaders gathered to talk about the future of tech, leadership, and change management. The kind of place where people didn't just show up for the buzzwords, but for real insight, real action. I wasn't sure at first. I wasn't trying to make waves, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized this was my chance to speak up, to say what I'd been holding back. When I stepped onto the stage, I could feel the eyes on me, some curious, others skeptical, but all waiting to hear what I had to say. I didn't name names, I didn't have to, but I could feel the weight of what I was about to drop. I talked about leadership, about how companies that claim to value people often do the exact opposite, about how a strong organization doesn't just survive change, it leads it. and how too many leaders, ones that like to sit at the top of their ivory towers, forget that change doesn't come from the top down, it comes from the ground up. They focus on profits, on numbers, and lose sight of the very people who make those numbers possible. It wasn't an attack, but it wasn't subtle either. The room was silent as I spoke, and I could feel the shift. I wasn't just talking about theory. I was talking about my experience. I could see the recognition in people's faces, and I knew they were connecting the dots. The second I stepped off the stage, the buzz started. Articles began circulating, picking apart my words. Journalists, hungry for the story behind the story, started digging. It didn't take long for them to link the subtext of my speech with Bright.Tech's collapse. They wanted to know what had gone wrong, and I wasn't going to stop them from asking the questions. Then came the backlash. Travis Walters, who had spent the last few months scrambling to cover his tracks, tried to deflect blame onto me. He accused me of abandoning the company at a critical time, of not being there when they needed me most. But the damage had already been done. Clients, partners, and stakeholders were losing faith in Bright.Tech's ability to lead. The rumors had already spread, and Travis's inability to manage the crisis was out in the open. I watched from a distance, not in triumph, but in quiet satisfaction, as Bright.Tech's stock price took a nosedive. The company that had discarded me was now fighting to stay afloat. And Travis? He was scrambling, trying to plug leaks in the ship while everyone else watched it sink. But I wasn't gloating. That wasn't the point. I wasn't there to tear anyone down. I was there to build something better. And with every day that passed, I felt the foundation under Sync Logic grow stronger. Then, during one of the breaks at the conference, something unexpected happened. A former Bright.Tech executive, someone who'd left the company long before I did, took the stage. He was well known, respected, and when he started speaking, everyone listened. He didn't need to say much. "I've seen what Jake Harper did for Bright.Tech," he said, his voice firm. "I've watched the man put in the work, build relationships, and make the company thrive. When they let him go, they made a mistake, a big one. And now, we're seeing the fallout." The room went silent. I couldn't believe it. This wasn't just some anonymous figure backing me up. This was a guy who had been there, who had seen it firsthand, and now he was publicly validating everything I'd been saying. That was the moment it really hit me. Bright.Tech had done everything they could to bury me, but it was too late. The truth was out there, and it was only a matter of time before the company's collapse became undeniable.